All right, everyone, welcome. Today, we're diving into a subject that has fascinated people for, well, decades, the Bermuda Triangle. So the big question is it really some kind of paranormal vortex, or is it more a case of sensational stories just running away from the science? Let's get into it.
Okay, so here's our game plan. First, we'll define what and where we're even talking about when we say Devil's Triangle. Then, we'll look at some of the infamous cases that built the whole legend. After that, we'll map out the actual real-world conditions in the area. We'll put the science against the legend, and finally, we'll see how its scary reputation really stacks up against reality.
So, let's jump right into our first section. Before we can even begin to pull apart the myth, we have to be clear on what we're actually talking about. We need to define our terms.
All right, so here's the classic definition you'll see everywhere. The Bermuda Triangle, sometimes called the Devil's Triangle, is this stretch of the North Atlantic Ocean kind of vaguely marked out by Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico. Now, the key phrase here, and this is really important, is loosely defined. There are no official borders, which, as we'll see, is a pretty big part of the whole story.
And we're not talking about a small patch of ocean here. We're talking about a huge area. The minimum estimate is 500,000 square miles. I mean, think about that. Some people even stretch it out to 1.5 million. So you've got this massive, undefined zone, and that vagueness really helps fuel the mystery, doesn't it?
Okay, this is a big one. You've got this place with a seriously scary reputation, right? But here's the thing. Official organizations, we're talking big names like NOAA and the U.S. Navy, they don't even recognize it. For them, there's no such thing as the Bermuda Triangle. It doesn't appear on any of their official maps or charts as a uniquely dangerous place. That's interesting.
All right, so if it's not on the official maps, where did the legend come from? Well, that brings us to our next section. Let's look at the stories, the infamous case files that really built this thing up.
And you can't just dismiss the stories out of hand, because the numbers seem pretty scary. We're talking about over 1,000 lives connected to disappearances in this general area over the last 100 years or so. When you hear a number like that, it's easy to see why the place has such a terrifying reputation.
And here are the two big ones. These are the poster children for the Bermuda Triangle myth. First, you have the USS Cyclops back in 1918, a massive Navy ship with over 300 people on board. Just gone. No distress call, nothing. Then you have the most famous one of all, Flight 19 in 1945. 5 Navy bombers on a routine training flight, they disappear. And get this, the rescue plane sent to look for them, it disappears too. You can see how stories like these just took on a life of their own.
Okay, so we've got the legend, we've got the stories. Now, let's switch gears and move away from the folklore and look at the hard science. What's actually going on in this part of the world, geologically and oceanographically?
Well, it turns out this region is just naturally a pretty wild place. The weather can turn on a dime. We're talking sudden, violent storms, hurricanes, massive waterspouts. Plus, you have the Gulf Stream ripping through there. It's like a massive high-speed river in the ocean, powerful enough to carry wreckage for miles and miles. And on top of all that, scientists now know about the existence of rogue waves. These are like literal walls of water that can appear out of nowhere. It's a tough neighborhood, to say the least.
So, that brings us to the main event. In this next section, we're going to put science and the legend head-to-head. Let's take everything we just learned about the natural environment here and see if we can find some logical explanations for all those spooky stories. So let's break it down. People talk about a mysterious vortex sucking things in. Well, you have the incredibly powerful Gulf Stream currents. People blame supernatural forces. How about just incredibly extreme and sudden weather? And what about things just vanishing without a trace? Well, rogue waves could certainly do that. And then there's a big one we haven't even mentioned yet, something that often gets lost in the spooky stories: simple human error.
And yeah, let's talk about that human element, because this is huge. This patch of ocean isn't some empty, forgotten corner of the world. It's basically a super highway for ships and planes. You've got tons of commercial and private traffic going through there every single day. And with that much traffic, well, you're just statistically going to have more accidents, more chances for someone to make a mistake, or for a piece of equipment to fail. It's just a numbers game.
Okay, for our last section, let's bring it all together. We've looked at the stories, we've looked at the science. Now let's see how the Bermuda Triangle's scary reputation actually holds up when we compare it to other places around the globe.
And this right here is probably the most telling piece of evidence. The World Wildlife Fund did a big study looking at shipping accidents all over the world. And guess what? The Bermuda Triangle isn't even in the top 10 most dangerous places for ships. Not even close. In fact, places like the South China Sea and the North Sea are statistically way more dangerous. That one fact really puts a dent in the whole legend, doesn't it?
So that leaves us with one final big question. If the data shows it's not uniquely dangerous, and if science can offer plausible explanations for the tragedies that have happened, why do we all still know about the Bermuda Triangle? Why does the legend stick around? Maybe an unsolved mystery is just more exciting, more compelling to us than a simple tragic accident. It's something to think about, isn't it?